Have you ever felt it? That sharp, almost electric reaction inside you that seems to come from nowhere? A sudden surge of anger, a wave of profound sadness, or a defensive wall that springs up before you've even had a chance to think. You might look at these parts of yourself, the quick temper, the relentless inner critic, the deep-seated need to be perfect, or the impulse to retreat from the world and believe they are fundamental flaws in your character. You might think, this is just who I am. But I am here to tell you, with the full conviction of the universe backing my words, that you are profoundly mistaken. That thing you despise most about yourself is not your true essence. It is not your personality. It is your pain, fossilized into a suit of spiritual armor. It is a brilliant, intricate survival mechanism forged in the fires of your past, a testament to the incredible strength you possessed when you had to endure the unendurable. And understanding this single monumental truth is the first step toward your ultimate liberation. The great spiritual teacher Carl Jung once declared, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This journey we are on together is about that choice. If this message already strikes a deep chord within your soul, know that you have found a sanctuary here. Acknowledge this resonance by liking this video, subscribing for more guidance, and sharing in the comments below with a simple, "I am ready to see," because your story is a sacred text. And today, we begin to learn how to read it. Let the world know you are not alone in this feeling, that your experience is valid and shared by so many other awakening souls. We see you, we honor your path, and we are here to walk it with you. This discovery will change everything you thought you knew about yourself. Stay with me all the way to the end, because what you are about to learn might finally illuminate those shadowed corners of your being that no one else, not even you, has ever truly understood. Let us first speak of the armor we all wear. Some souls move through this world encased in a fortress of ice. They appear cold, distant, hard to reach, and even harder to love. You may have encountered them, or perhaps, if you are truly honest with yourself, you may be one of them. Their words are clipped, their emotions are guarded, their vulnerability is buried so deep it seems non-existent. But you must understand this with every fiber of your being. This is not an absence of warmth. It is a shield. It is the result of a soul that offered its warmth freely, only to have it met with the biting frost of betrayal or indifference. They learned, in the cruelest and most definitive way, that to be open was to be wounded. So they built walls, not to keep the world out, but to keep the shattering echoes of old pain locked safely within. Every interaction is assessed for risk. Every new person is a potential threat. And every gesture of kindness is viewed through a lens of suspicion. This is not a choice made from malice, but a strategy for survival. In truth, these souls are not trying to push you away. They are desperately trying, with all their might, not to get hurt again. Pain, you see, does not simply linger like a passing shadow. No, it is a master alchemist. It takes the very fabric of our reality and reweaves it. It rewires our neural pathways, alters our energetic frequency, and fundamentally changes the way we perceive and exist in the world. And the most heartbreaking part of this transformation? The worst part of this silent internal battle? Almost no one ever notices. The world sees the armor, but it rarely, if ever, asks about the wounds that necessitated its creation. Carl Jung, a true pioneer of the soul's landscape, taught us a profound truth about this process. He revealed that when pain is not consciously understood, when it is not met with compassion and integrated with wisdom, it does not simply vanish into the ether. It cannot. The energy must go somewhere. So, it hides, it morphs, it sinks deep into the unconscious, and begins to express itself in other ways. It becomes our inexplicable behaviors, our self-sabotaging patterns, our rigid beliefs. It crystallizes into habits so deeply ingrained, they feel like the very core of our identity. That constant anxiety, that's not just you. It's the echo of a time when your world felt unsafe, a young part of you still scanning the horizon for a danger that has long since passed. That fierce independence that refuses all help, that is not just strength. It is the memory of a time when you were let down, a solemn vow made by your younger self to never rely on anyone again. Jung called the public face we present, this carefully constructed identity, the persona. It begins as a flexible mask, a social tool to help us navigate the world. But for the wounded soul, this mask becomes fused to the skin. It starts as protection, but over time, it hardens into a cage, trapping the true self, the higher self, in a prison of its own making. This armor, in all its varied forms, is the psyche's primal scream, a declaration etched into our very cells. Never, ever again. Let us now examine the most common forms of this spiritual armor, for in recognizing the shape of our cage, we can begin to find the key. The first, and perhaps most obvious, is this profound guardedness. These are not cold people, far from it. They are often the souls with the deepest capacity for love, the ones who once felt everything with a searing intensity. They are the ones who learned, in the most brutal and unforgiving classroom of life, that warmth comes at a terrible cost. Every time they trusted, it burned them. Every time they opened their heart, it was met with a blade. So, they constructed impenetrable walls, brick by painful brick. These walls were not built with the intention of isolating others, but with the desperate need to contain the raging inferno of their own past pain, to keep it from consuming them completely. They stand as silent sentinels, guarding a treasure they no longer dare to share. They have forgotten that the same walls that keep out the pain also keep out the love, the joy, and the divine connection their soul so deeply craves. Then there is the armor of withdrawal. You see it in the person who cancels plans at the last minute, who leaves the party early, who seems to fade into the background of their own life. This is not indifference. It is not arrogance. It is a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. For someone who has been hurt too much, the world no longer feels like a playground of possibility. It feels like a minefield. Every conversation, every social gathering, every new relationship is fraught with potential triggers. Every interaction risks detonating a buried memory, an unresolved emotion they feel utterly powerless to control. And so, they disappear. They retreat into what begins as a quiet sanctuary, a place of safety and peace. But what starts as a refuge from the storm can, over time, become a self-imposed exile. The isolation that once felt like a blessing hardens into a prison. They become ghosts in their own lives, watching the world through a window, forever separate, forever longing. What Jung knew, and what we must come to understand, is that this isolation, this withdrawal, is a soul's desperate plea for rest, a cry for a world that feels safe enough to simply be. Consider also the intricate armor of overthinking. This is the mind that races, a relentless engine of analysis, replaying past conversations, dissecting every word, and mapping out every conceivable future scenario. On the surface, it can look like intelligence, like a sharp and strategic mind. But look deeper, feel the energy behind it. It is not intelligence, it is fear. It is a terrified inner child attempting to control the uncontrollable. It is the fear of feeling. Because when your emotions have betrayed you before, when they have led you into unbearable pain, logic becomes the only safe ground. If you can just think your way through every possibility, if you can just anticipate every potential danger, then maybe, just maybe, you can prevent history from repeating itself. The mind becomes a fortress, a labyrinth of complex thought patterns designed to keep the unpredictable, messy, and terrifying world of emotion at bay. But Jung warned us of this very trap. He knew that knowledge without feeling, intellect without heart, is just another, more sophisticated form of armor. It separates us from our own embodied wisdom, from the intuitive guidance of our higher self, and leaves us stranded in a cold, sterile fortress of our own making. And then there is the cruelest twist of all, a defense mechanism so subtle and often so celebrated that it is rarely seen for what it truly is. I speak of the ones who suffer so deeply that they become hypersensitive to the pain of others. These are the empaths, the healers, the tireless caretakers, the ones who see you with a clarity that can take your breath away. They can feel your unspoken sorrows, they can anticipate your needs before you are even aware of them yourself, and they will move heaven and earth to soothe your suffering. The world praises them for their selflessness, for for their boundless compassion. But you must look closer. Sometimes, that empathy isn't pure divine connection. It's projection. They are trying to heal in others what is still broken and bleeding within themselves. In tending to your wounds, they get a momentary reprieve from the agony of their own. Jung revealed something truly revolutionary about this dynamic. These behaviors, these intricate patterns of relating, are not random. They are what he called complexes, constellations of emotional memories, frozen in time, orbiting around a central unresolved wound. A rejection in childhood doesn't just hurt once. It creates an energetic complex that becomes a hair-trigger response to any perceived slight in adulthood. A betrayal doesn't just break the heart in that moment. It twists into a lifelong distrust that poisons future relationships. The psyche, you see, does not forget. It anticipates. It remembers the vibration of the original wound and relentlessly, unconsciously, works to protect you from ever feeling it again. But here is the sacred pivot. Here is the truth that changes everything. The moment you realize, truly realize, that this is not who you are, but what happened to you, the chains begin to loosen. The armor is not your skin. The wound is not your worth. And that monumental shift in perception, that transition from the self-condemning question of, "What's wrong with me?" to the compassionate inquiry of, "What happened to me?" is the precise point where the soul begins to breathe again. It is the dawn after a long, dark night. Consider the person who seems unshakable, the one who is always composed, always in control. On the surface, they appear so strong, so resilient. But beneath that steely, polished exterior, there often lies a very different story. It is the story of someone who learned far too early, in the tender years of childhood, that vulnerability was dangerous. It is the story of a soul that was not given the space to be soft, to be messy, to be human. Jung understood this dynamic intimately. He saw how children who were not allowed to express their pain, who were told to be strong or stop crying, would eventually construct what the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott later called a false self. This is a carefully curated version of their being, a performance designed to please, to appease, to earn love, and ultimately, to survive. Years later, this becomes the adult who cannot show weakness, who carries the weight of the world on their shoulders without complaint, who fears, above all else, being found out. They have come to mistake the mask for their true face, the armor for their own skin, forgetting the vibrant, authentic self that lies dormant beneath. Then, of course, there is the opposite reaction, the soul that wears its heart on its sleeve for all the world to see. This is the person who feels too much, too deeply. They are the ones who absorb the emotions of others, like sponges, who cry at commercials, who can sense the subtle shifts in a room's energy before a single word is spoken. Jung would say that this isn't just sensitivity. It's often a form of unconscious resonance. Their nervous system, due to early life experiences, has been wired to detect even the most subtle threats, to constantly scan their environment for signs of danger. What looks like intuition is sometimes trauma in disguise. The psyche, in its desperate, lifelong attempt to prevent the recurrence of past pain, becomes hypervigilant, always scanning, always preparing for the other shoe to drop. Perhaps most heartbreaking of all are those who have simply stopped expecting goodness. They no longer dream big. They refuse to get their hopes up. They brace themselves for disappointment long before it ever arrives. This is not pessimism, it is learned survival. When life has broken your heart one too many times, hope stops feeling like optimism and starts feeling like a reckless, dangerous gamble. Jung called this phenomenon psychic resignation. It is the soul's quiet way of saying, if I don't want anything, I can't lose anything. But the tragic irony is that in protecting themselves from potential pain, they also wall off their access to potential joy. The behaviors run deeper still. There is the person who unconsciously sabotages good things just as they get close. The one who picks fights when things become too peaceful because chaos is a more familiar frequency than harmony. The one who cannot accept a genuine compliment without deflecting it because deep down they carry a core belief of unworthiness. These are not conscious choices, they are reflexes, the soul's ingrained muscle memory. Jung taught us that the unconscious mind would rather recreate a familiar pain than risk an unknown pleasure. It's the old adage, better the devil you know than the heaven you don't trust. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet, the ones who never complain, who seem to handle everything completely on their own, are often the most profoundly wounded. Their independence is not an innate quality, it was a necessity forced upon them. Jung observed that when no one was there to catch them, they had no choice but to become unbreakable. But this strength comes at a cost. It creates an inability to lean on others, to admit weakness, to surrender. Their greatest survival strategy ultimately becomes their most isolating prison. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to relive the same painful patterns over and over again? They attract partners who hurt them in hauntingly familiar ways. They recreate the dynamics of their childhood in their adult relationships. The psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud called this the repetition compulsion. But Jung saw a deeper, more profound meaning in it. The psyche, in its desperate attempt to heal, recreates the circumstances of the original wound, not to suffer again, but to finally solve it, to finally achieve a different outcome. It's as if the unconscious believes, this time, if I go through it again, I'll get it right. There is a particular way pain manifests in those who were taught, especially as men, that emotions are shameful. Their withdrawal is not indifference. It is often the only language of pain they have. Having been raised to believe that vulnerability is synonymous with weakness, their suffering goes mute, expressing itself only through action or inaction over work. Addiction, a stoic and unyielding silence. Jung warned that when pain cannot speak, it acts, and often it acts destructively. Then there are those who love too much, who give too much, who caretake to the absolute point of exhaustion. On the surface, they seem entirely selfless, but Jung would point out that this excessive generosity often masks a terrible, deep-seated fear. If I stop giving, will I still be loved? Their kindness is not pure. It is a form of insurance against abandonment. And when they inevitably burn out, their resentment confuses them, because good people aren't supposed to feel this way. Some behaviors make no sense in the present because they are not about the present. A grown woman panics when someone raises their voice, not because of the current situation, but because the echo of her father's rage still lives in her bones. A man flinches at a gentle touch, though no one hurts him now. These are phantom pains, Jung would say, the body keeping the score long after the game is over. There's a particular kind of person who seems angry at everything. They are quick to judge, fast to criticize, wearing their bitterness like a second skin. But Jung would whisper, rage is just grief that never got to be. When pain is not allowed its expression as sorrow, it hardens into something sharper, something more volatile. That explosive temper? It's often the primal howl of a child who was never permitted to say, this hurt me. The work then is not to eliminate the anger, but to follow it back to its source, to the original wound that still believes destruction is the only form of power it has. Some people don't fight or flee, they freeze. They disappear inside themselves during conflict. They go blank when emotions run high. Modern psychology calls this dissociation, but Jung saw its deeper, symbolic meaning. The soul retreating to a place where it cannot be reached. This isn't weakness. It's the body remembering a time when stillness was the only safety. The tragedy is that this brilliant survival mechanism, this life-saving retreat, becomes the very thing that prevents healing in the present, because you cannot process what you cannot feel. The micromanager, the perfectionist, the one who needs everything to be just so. Their behavior is not about standards, but about terror. Jung recognized that when chaos ruled someone's past, order becomes their god. Every spreadsheet, every clean surface is a spell cast against the unpredictability that once threatened to destroy them. But life cannot be controlled, only lived. And their greatest growth comes when they can learn to tolerate a little mess, a little uncertainty, and discover, to their astonishment, that they will not shatter. Watch how some people react to small goodbyes, a friend canceling plans, a partner working late. The intensity of their response often seems disproportionate, because it is. They are not reacting to the present moment, but to every abandonment that came before it. Jung called these feeling-toned complexes, emotional memories so charged with energy that they hijack the present. Until these old wounds are brought into the light of consciousness, the person remains a prisoner of the past, forever reacting to patterns they don't even understand. They are the ones who are always joking, always deflecting with wit, turning everything into a punchline. It makes them popular, endearing, and fun to be around, but Jung would see the shadow beneath. He would recognize humor as another form of armor. When laughter comes too quickly, too constantly, it is often silencing something else. It is using charm to keep others at a safe distance. The class clown is not always happy. Sometimes he has simply learned that people will accept his jokes more readily than they will ever accept his pain. Some people do not scream their pain. They whisper it through what they carefully avoid, the conversations they steer away from, the relationships they won't commit to, the opportunities they sabotage just before they can blossom. Their avoidance speaks volumes in the negative space, in what never happens, in the paths never taken. They present a flawless facade, high achievers with impeccable standards. But beneath this polished surface churns a terrible truth. Their perfection is not aspiration, it is atonement. Jung would recognize this as the golden shadow, the desperate attempt to compensate for a hidden, deep-seated sense of unworthiness through external validation. Every perfect grade, every promotion, is another brick in the wall against an old, insidious voice whispering, "You are not good enough." The tragedy is that no achievement ever truly silences it, because the wound was not created in the present and cannot be healed by it. Some become experts at analyzing everyone else's pain but their own. They become the therapists, the healers, the advice givers. They can spot a wound in others from miles away but remain utterly mystified by their own. Jung called this seeing the mote in your brother's eye while missing the beam in your own. Their incredible insight into others is both a genuine gift and a clever distraction. If they are busy excavating your psyche, they don't have to face what lies buried in theirs. Their brilliance at naming the shadows of others becomes the very thing that keeps their own in darkness. Their body is present, but their mind is always elsewhere, reliving past hurts or anticipating future ones. Jung understood this as the psyche's attempt to control the uncontrollable by mentally rehearsing every possible scenario. But this constant time-hopping comes at a cost. They are never truly here. Their partner's touch finds them distracted. The sunset passes unnoticed. Life happens around them while they are busy fighting battles that have either already ended or may never even come. The present moment becomes a foreign country they can't quite inhabit. Yet within all these patterns, within these intricate and often painful defenses, lies a hidden, sacred truth. These are not flaws of character, but fractures of the soul. The coldness is not an absence of love. It is love that learned to hide. The anger is not cruelty. It is pain that found no other voice. The distance is not rejection. It is the only way a wounded part of you knows how to say, "I am scared." Jung's greatest and most radical insight was this: what we resist persists. The pain we do not acknowledge does not disappear. It simply goes underground, shaping our lives from the shadows. But the moment we bring the light of conscious, compassionate awareness to these hidden places, something miraculous happens. The armor begins to soften. The reactions lose their sharp edge. We start to see that these behaviors, however destructive they may have become, began as acts of profound courage. They were the psyche's best attempt at survival in impossible circumstances. Before transformation can occur, there is a crucial, often overlooked stage, the liminal space where pain begins its alchemical shift. Jung observed that our defenses contain their own antidotes, if only we know how to look. Consider the perfectionist's exquisite attention to detail. That same hyperfocus that exhausts them could become an artist's mastery when it is finally liberated from fear. Those hands that tremble at the thought of making a mistake are the very hands that could sculpt breathtaking beauty once they are free to create without self-flagellation. The empath's overwhelming sensitivity? It is a therapist's greatest gift when it is properly bounded and understood. That ability to detect microscopic shifts in mood is not a curse. It is a finely tuned radar system that could navigate the complexities of human suffering with extraordinary precision, if only it could be calibrated to include compassion for oneself. Even the chronic overthinker's racing mind holds the makings of a profound philosopher. Those neural pathways that tirelessly analyze every possibility are the same ones that could synthesize groundbreaking ideas if they were redirected from imagined catastrophes to genuine curiosity. Jung anticipated the findings of modern somatics when he wrote that the body bears the burden of what the mind cannot bear to remember. Those unexplained aches and chronic tensions are not random. They are hieroglyphs of history, written in flesh. The stomach that knots when someone raises their voice is not malfunctioning, it is archiving. Your shoulders do not just carry stress, they carry the weight of every time you had to be strong too soon. That tension in your jaw is an entire library of swallowed words, dating back to your earliest childhood. Healing requires listening to this somatic language, not just analyzing thoughts, but befriending the physical self that has borne the weight of survival for so long. All of these behaviors, all of these defenses, share one fundamental truth. They were solutions before they became problems. Every defense mechanism was once a stroke of genius that kept a younger version of you alive. Jung's radical invitation is to approach these parts of yourself not with shame, but with awe. Look at how brilliantly you survived. Then, and only then, can they begin to relax their grip. The path is not about eliminating these patterns, but about relating to them differently, not as enemies to be destroyed, but as wounded allies to be integrated. What Jung ultimately reveals is that our most puzzling behaviors are not flaws to be fixed, but messages to be deciphered. The coldness, the withdrawal, the overthinking, they are not who you are, but what you had to become in order to survive. The psyche, in its infinite wisdom, adapted in the only ways it knew how. But here lies the turning point. Survival strategies that once protected you can become the very walls that isolate you from life's richness. Healing begins when you approach these patterns not with judgment, but with curiosity. When you stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start asking, "What is this behavior trying to tell me?" That guardedness, it speaks of old betrayals that still need comforting. That perfectionism, it carries the voice of someone who once made you feel you weren't enough. Your mind and your body have been whispering these truths all along, just waiting for you to finally listen. Jung's work reminds us that integration, not elimination, is the true path to wholeness. You do not erase the past, you reclaim its power. That hypervigilance can become profound intuition. That emotional armor can transform into healthy boundaries. That wounded healer within you can finally learn to tend to yourself first. The goal is not to become someone new, but to finally meet yourself, the self that existed before the wounds, the self that still waits patiently beneath the scars. This is the sacred invitation. To see your survival mechanisms not as life sentences, but as bridges back to your own soul. The behaviors that once kept you safe can now point you toward the places that still need your attention, your kindness, your voice. The journey isn't about fixing what's broken, but remembering what was never broken to begin with. And perhaps that is Jung's greatest gift of all, the understanding that even in our deepest suffering, we are not ruined, but preparing. Every wound contains the blueprint of its own healing. Every defense, once understood, becomes a doorway. The question is no longer, "What's wrong with me?" but rather, "Where does my pain want to lead me?" The answer, when you are truly ready to hear it, will change everything.